don't know, I don't really do stand-up poetry. I do stand-up for the great post-war generation of French thinkers. He dies in 1995. This isn't his best piece, but it will perform well. In case you wondered, aesthete is the science of thisness. It comes from Duns Scotus. As I said, Gilles Deleuze, he's a bit tricky, so if you only understand one word in 5, doesn't matter much. The other one is a little bit of an indirect boast. Since God knows when, I've had an article always about to be published on Gilles Deleuze Reader, and it looks like it's actually coming out. So if you want to get the Christmas present to end all Christmas presents, buy it. It's only 46 bloody pounds. And if you give it to somebody, nobody will ever give you a Christmas present again, I think. Right, becoming aesthete. It is the eternal credit of Spinoza that he discovered that a body is not made of flesh or bone or substance or subject, but rather relations of motion, of rest, speed and suddenness, of stillness, so quiet it never moves. And crisscrossing these relations, crisscrossing this tempest, there are intensities, passions, powers that live by change, that live in creating. But what individuality Chris holds this tempest in, quite different than a subject or a substance. Think of the summers of the void. They are the power of that Christmas. The Christmas you all remember. The Christmas you went mad, whose days you can still trace. Or the events of that hot September, the day the world changed and a decade was pulled out. Nor does such an individuality know nothing of its own singularity. Rather, it will gather up what events it can, hold them in itself, a patchwork of intensity, of power, of passion, of motion. Say it in one breath. The hot, sultry summer, the crazy 5 o'clock, when fascism rose and love fell. But what time? What time do these events have? What time do this passion? This is not the time, the tick-tock of a clock, the fetid chronos, but rather it is aeon, the time of the event. Think, there are creatures that live for but a second, but an hour, but that does not mean they have any less life. Rather, than a turtle that could live a millennia. It is rather their life is arranged quite different. It does not hold on to itself. It pictures its difference in the void. It lives a non-pulse, crazy, mad time, racing across the world, living in your minds, in my mind, in endless becoming, in endless change, in endless difference. And a crazy, non-pulse time, the time when everything is too late or too soon, like a word whose meaning is only pitched the moment after it exists, the moment after it is spoken, that only means when it is no more. This is the time of Dionysus Zagros, the time of the god who exists in being pulled apart and laughs in the lightning of his destruction, the lightning in all our minds. You have then the individuality of a day, an hour, a tempest or a storm, if only you choose to live it. And you have had it since ever you were a child, and had a chuckle without a mind. But be warned, you will give nothing to this individuality. You give it no power as long as you tie it to your personhood. Say it in one breath. The vampire stalks at 5 o'clock on a summer's afternoon. Or the philosopher falls off the curb in Turin in January as the horse is beaten to death in the street. The death of Nietzsche as he rises up mad, and the death of the horse are the same event, all rolled up into one. Say then with Mrs. Dalloway as she walks through London in the 1920s, it is so very dangerous to live but for one moment, to cut through everything like a knife, but be quite outside and never say he does this or he does that, to feel both young and old. But how then can one talk of these events? 3 guiding principles. All events exist in the infinitive. I don't walk as an event. A walk is merely a statement of being. Rather, it is to walk, and we are all there, all in the passion and the motion, all caught up in the event. The event only knows the infinitive. But also, it knows only proper nouns. It is not a man walks, but Matthew that walks the street to walk a street. They know then only the proper name that rolls up as a military campaign or a storm rolls up, Hurricane Hannah or the desert storm, a name that holds the intensities together. And finally, all events are indefinite. It is not of this boy being beaten, this little Hans, but rather a Hans who is beaten. For the child inhabits the beating. You have an intensity, a power, a passion to live, if only you choose to live it. You have eternity to gain, but only your mortality to lose.